The metal gate was padlocked from the outside. Not locked to keep people out. Locked to keep people in. 87 people, dancing, drinking, celebrating, trapped behind a single entrance that doubled as the only exit. The building had no fire exits, no sprinkler system, no fire extinguishers, no emergency lighting, no smoke detectors. Every single safety requirement that New York City Fire Code demanded, completely absent. The fire marshal had shut the club down 2 years earlier for violations. The owner just changed the name from Bronx Tropicana to Happy Land and kept operating. No permits, no inspections, no licenses. Just a padlock, and a steady stream of Honduran immigrants paying $5 each to dance to Latin music in what was essentially a fire trap. But Julio Gonzalez didn't care about any of that. He cared about one thing. His ex-girlfriend Lydia Feliciano worked the coat check, and she'd told him earlier that night that it was over, that she was done, that he needed to leave her alone. So he walked to a nearby gas station, spent $1 on gasoline, poured it at the entrance, and lit a match. 45 seconds. That's how long it took for 87 people to die. The fire didn't spread, it flashed over, a rolling wave of superheated gas that consumed everything in its path. Most victims never made it to the staircase, they died where they stood, dancing, talking, laughing. Their last moments, spent trying to breathe air that had become fire. And the man who started it, he walked home, watched television, went to bed. Like nothing had happened. This is the story of the Happy Land Social Club fire. The story of how institutional neglect, regulatory failure, and one man's jealous rage combined to create the deadliest fire in New York City's history. A fire that killed more people than any disaster in the city except September 11th. But unlike that attack, this catastrophe was completely preventable. Every victim, every single one, died because systems designed to protect them had been systematically ignored. Because immigrant communities were seen as expendable. Because profit mattered more than safety. And because when warnings came, they were dismissed, forgotten, filed away. Until 87 people paid the price. The Bronx, New York. 1987. East Tremont Avenue was the heart of the immigrant community, Honduran families, Guatemalan families, working multiple jobs, sending money home, building new lives in America. The neighborhood had its gathering places, restaurants, shops, and social clubs where people could dance, listen to music from home, speak Spanish without judgment. The building at 1767 Southern Boulevard had been a social club for years. First it was called Bronx Tropicana, a place where Latin music played until 2 a.m., where couples danced merengue and salsa, where the community celebrated birthdays, weddings, new jobs. It was an old building, 2 stories, wood frame construction, built in 1911. The first floor had been converted into a social club, the second floor, sealed off, unused. J. Weiss owned the building, he bought it as an investment property, collected rent from whoever operated the club. In 1988, the fire marshal shut down Bronx Tropicana. No fire exits, no sprinklers, overcrowding, multiple violations. The city said, quote, "This premises is not to be occupied for any purpose until all violations are corrected and proper permits obtained." But Elias Colon, the operator, just changed the name. Bronx Tropicana became Happy Land Social Club. Same building, same violations, new sign. Nobody came back to check. Why would they? It was just another club in the Bronx, serving immigrants who didn't complain, who didn't call city agencies, who were just trying to find a place to gather. The building's layout was simple and deadly. A single entrance on Southern Boulevard, heavy metal gate, usually padlocked. You walked through the gate, up 4 steps, through a door into the ground floor club. Inside, one large room, maybe 30 feet by 40 feet, a small bar in the corner, tables and chairs, dance floor, DJ booth. In the back, a narrow staircase leading up to the second floor, sealed off, not in use. That was it. One way in, one way out. Fire Marshal James Gaudino had inspected the building in March 1988 when it was Bronx Tropicana. He found, quote, no certificate of occupancy, no fire exits, building overcrowded beyond legal capacity, no sprinkler system, no fire alarm system, inadequate emergency lighting, combustible materials throughout. He ordered it closed. He told the building owner and the club operator that the place couldn't reopen without major renovations. New fire exits, sprinklers, proper emergency lighting, compliance with fire code. His report was filed. The building was supposed to remain closed. But Gaudino would later testify, quote, we shut him down, we documented the violations, but we don't have the manpower to check every closed establishment. We assume when we order a place closed, it stays closed. We were wrong. The club reopened under a new name within weeks. The violations, still there, still dangerous, still deadly. Lydia Feliciano was 24 years old. She'd emigrated from Honduras, working multiple jobs, living with family in the Bronx. She worked coat check at Happy Land on weekends, $5 an hour plus tips. The money helped. She'd been dating Julio Gonzalez, on and off, for a while. But the relationship had become troubled. He was jealous, possessive, called constantly, showed up at her work. Her sister Carmen Fernandez would later tell investigators, quote, Lydia said he was getting scary. He'd call 30 times a day, wait outside her apartment, follow her. She wanted to end it but was afraid of how he'd react. We told her to get a restraining order. She said she would, but she never did. March 25, 1990, Sunday morning, around 3 a.m. Happy Land Social Club was packed. Maybe 150 people, shoulder to shoulder, dancing to Latin music, drinking beer and rum, celebrating the weekend. Most were Honduran immigrants, young, working class, here for a few hours of escape from their lives of double shifts and crowded apartments. The DJ was playing merengue, people dancing, talking, laughing. Outside, Julio Gonzalez approached the club. Witnesses would later describe him as agitated, angry, pacing back and forth on the sidewalk. He tried to enter the club. Bouncer Ruben Valladares stopped him at the door. Gonzalez was already drunk, belligerent, demanding to see Lydia. An argument started. Voices raised. Gonzalez tried to push past. Valladares and another patron, Carlos Franco, physically removed him from the club. Gonzalez stood outside, shouting, making threats. Quote from Valladares' testimony. He was screaming that he was going to kill her, that he was going to kill everyone. We didn't take it seriously. Drunk guys say things like that all the time. We told him to go home. He left, walking south on Southern Boulevard. Lydia Feliciano saw the argument from inside. She told a friend, quote, "He's going to do something crazy. I know him. When he gets like this, he doesn't think straight." But what could she do? Call the police. For what? A drunk ex-boyfriend making threats. In the Bronx in 1990, police had bigger problems. So she went back to work, taking coats, making small talk, trying not to think about Julio. What she didn't know was that he'd walked to Amoco gas station 3 blocks away. He had $1 in his pocket. He bought $1 worth of gasoline. The attendant, Tariq Ahad, would later testify. Quote, "He came in, asked for $1 of gas. I thought it was strange. Who buys $1 of gas? But I filled a small container. He paid. He left. I didn't think anything of it." Gonzalez walked back to Happy Land, carrying $1 worth of gasoline. About 1 gallon. Enough. 3:26 a.m. Gonzalez returned to the club. The metal security gate was still open, wedged with a piece of wood. He walked through, climbed the 4 steps, stood at the entrance. Inside, people were still dancing, DJ still playing. Nobody noticed him at first. He unscrewed the cap on the container, poured the gasoline on the floor, just inside the entrance, creating a pool of liquid that flowed down the 4 steps. Pulled out a book of matches and lit one. The gasoline ignited instantly. A flash fire, spreading across the liquid surface in less than a second. Then, something much worse happened. The fire created a thermal low-pressure zone, sucking air from outside through the open door. That fresh air, superheated by the flames, rose rapidly. The club's wooden construction, dry from decades of heating systems, ignited almost instantly. Walls, ceiling, furniture, everything combustible. Within 15 seconds, the entire ground floor was engulfed. Fire science expert Dr. John Hall would later explain at the trial. Quote, "What happened at Happy Land was a perfect storm of fire dynamics. You had a confined space, wooden construction, a single ignition point blocking the only exit, and a rapid influx of oxygen. The fire flashed over almost immediately, moving from ignition to full room involvement in under 30 seconds. Most fires take minutes to develop, this one took seconds. The temperature inside the club reached 1000 degrees Fahrenheit in under a minute. At that temperature, you don't have time to think, to react, to find another exit. You just die." Inside the club, panic was instant. 150 people, suddenly realizing they were trapped. The entrance, the only exit, was a wall of fire. The narrow staircase in the back led to a sealed second floor, no exit there. No fire exits, no emergency doors, no windows large enough to escape through. Just 150 people, trapped in a burning building. Ruben Valladares, the bouncer who'd thrown Gonzalez out, was near the entrance when the fire started. He saw the flames, saw Gonzalez standing outside. Realized immediately what had happened. Valladares ran through the flames, suffering severe burns, made it outside. He would be one of only 7 survivors. Armando Ruiz was dancing with his girlfriend near the back. He described the moment to investigators, quote, "1 second we were dancing, the next, people were screaming. I looked toward the door and saw fire everywhere, blocking the exit. People were running toward the back, climbing on top of each other, trying to find a way out. There was no way out." Ruiz and his girlfriend, Maria Santos, tried the staircase. They climbed to the second floor, found it sealed, no exit, no windows they could break. They came back down. The fire had consumed the ground floor. The smoke, thick, black, toxic. Ruiz realized they had seconds, not minutes. He saw a small bathroom, door still closed. He and Maria, along with 3 others, squeezed into that tiny space, shut the door. It was maybe 4 feet by 6 feet. 5 people, huddled together, breathing the small amount of air that remained. Outside that door, 143 people died. Inside, they waited, praying, crying, listening to the screams that eventually stopped. Lydia Feliciano, the woman Gonzalez had come to kill, was working coat check in the back corner. Witnesses said she tried to help people, directing them toward the back, looking for exits that didn't exist. Her body was found near the rear wall, along with dozens of others. The fire burned for approximately 3 minutes before there was nothing left to burn. 3 minutes. 87 people dead. The fastest killing fire in New York City history. 3:29 a.m., 3 minutes after ignition. The first 911 call came from a neighbor. Juan Morales lived across the street. Quote from his call, preserved in fire department records. "There's fire at the club, Happyland. People are screaming, oh God. There are so many people inside." The dispatcher asked if anyone was trapped. Everyone is trapped. It's just one door. They can't get out." Fire Department Battalion Chief James McManus was the first officer on scene. His unit arrived at 3:33 a.m., 7 minutes after ignition. What he saw would haunt him for the rest of his life. The entrance was still burning, smoke pouring out the door. The metal security gate, now heated to several hundred degrees. And people. Bodies, piled at the entrance, trying to escape, never making it. McManus would later testify, quote, "I've been a firefighter for 27 years. I've seen fires, bad fires, structure collapses. But I'd never seen anything like this. The bodies were stacked. Some were still standing, like they'd been frozen in place, trying to climb over each other, clawing at the door. It was a vision of hell." Firefighter Robert Torres was in McManus's company. Quote from his account. "We got the door open, the smoke cleared, and we saw them, just bodies, everywhere, some still holding each other, some alone, all of them dead. I counted 30, 40, I lost count. Later they told us 87, I still have nightmares. 20 years later, I still see their faces." The fire itself was out. It had consumed everything in minutes and burned itself out. But the smoke, toxic, filled with carbon monoxide from incomplete combustion, had killed most of the victims. Not burns, not flames. Asphyxiation. They'd breathed superheated air mixed with carbon monoxide, lost consciousness in seconds, died in under a minute. Fire investigator Bernard Mullins would later explain, quote, Most people think fire kills through burning. It doesn't. Not usually. Fire kills through smoke and gas, carbon monoxide, hydrogen cyanide from burning plastics. At Happy Land, the toxic atmosphere developed so rapidly that most victims were incapacitated before they could even reach the door. They just collapsed wherever they were standing. The recovery operation took hours. Firefighters, many crying, removed body after body. The medical examiner's office, overwhelmed, set up a temporary morgue outside. 87 bodies, laid in rows on the street, covered with white sheets. News helicopters, circling overhead, broadcasting the scene to a shocked city. Among the dead, 49 were identified as Honduran nationals, the rest, Guatemalan, Ecuadorian, Mexican, Dominican. All immigrants, all working class, all young, average age, 27. Jose Antonio Gonzalez, age 23, worked construction, sending money home to his mother in Tegucigalpa. Maria del Carmen Sanchez, age 19, worked in a clothing factory, engaged to be married in 2 months. Pedro Miguel Morales, age 31, father of 3, worked 2 jobs, hadn't been out dancing in months. 84 others. Each one, someone's child, someone's sibling, someone's parent. All dead, in 3 minutes. 7 people survived. Ruben Valladares, the bouncer who ran through the flames. Armando Ruiz and Maria Santos, the couple who hid in the bathroom. 3 others who made it out in the first seconds. That's it. 7 survivors, out of over 150 people. The worst survival rate of any fire in American history. Lydia Feliciano, the woman Gonzalez came to kill. Dead. She died trying to help others escape. Her family would later say, quote, "That was Lydia, always helping, always thinking of others. Even in her last moments, she was trying to save people." Gonzalez, the man who started the fire. He walked home. 3 blocks away. Watched the news coverage on television. Saw the bodies, the survivors, the fire trucks. And did nothing. His roommate, Josefina Garcia, would later testify, quote, "He came home around 4 a.m. I was awake, watching TV. The news was showing the fire. Julio sat down, watched with me. He seemed calm, not upset, not worried, just calm. He said, 'That's terrible.' Then he went to bed. I didn't know. I had no idea." But Julio Gonzalez knew what he'd done. And he couldn't stay silent. At 10:15 a.m., 7 hours after the fire, Gonzalez walked to a police precinct. He approached the desk sergeant and said, quote, "I did it. I started the fire at Happy Land. I killed them." The sergeant, stunned, called detectives. Detective Alfonso Rodriguez conducted the initial interrogation. Quote from his case notes. Subject Gonzalez entered station at 10:15 hours. Stated he was responsible for Happy Land fire. Appeared calm, rational, showed no remorse. When asked why, subject stated his girlfriend worked there and had ended their relationship. When asked if he understood 87 people were dead, subject stated, "I just wanted to make her hurt." The interrogation, recorded on video, would become evidence. Gonzalez confessed everything. Buying the gasoline, pouring it, lighting the match, watching it ignite. He knew the club had only one exit. He knew it would trap people inside. He knew they would die. He did it anyway. When asked if he regretted it, he said, quote, "I regret that she survived. That was the point, to kill her." Lydia hadn't survived, but he didn't know that yet. The confession, detailed, emotionless, would seal his fate. But it would also raise questions about everyone else involved. The building owner, the club operator, the city officials who knew about the violations. If Gonzalez was guilty of murder, what were they guilty of? The investigation expanded rapidly. Fire marshals, police detectives, district attorney's office, federal investigators. All digging into how an illegal club, shut down 2 years earlier, had been operating with impunity. Building owner Jay Weiss, interviewed by investigators, initially claimed ignorance. He said he thought the club had corrected all violations, that he was just a landlord collecting rent. But investigators found his signature on lease agreements dated after the shutdown order. He knew the club was operating, he knew it had violations, he didn't care. Elias Colon, the club operator, was arrested and charged. He'd changed the name, reopened without permits, collected $5 per person knowing the building was a death trap. Quote from District Attorney Robert Morgenthau's statement. Mr. Colon operated an illegal establishment. He knew it had no fire exits. He knew it was overcrowded. He knew it violated every fire safety code in New York City. He packed people in anyway. Because he was making money, 87 people died because of his greed. But what about the city? Fire Marshal Gaudino had shut the club down in 1988. His report was filed. The order was issued. Then, nothing. No follow-up inspection, no verification of closure, no enforcement. The city's buildings department, fire department, business licensing bureau, none of them checked. How does an illegal club operate for 2 years without anyone noticing? Reporter Jim Dwyer of Newsday would later write, quote, "Happy Land was an invisible establishment, serving an invisible population, Honduran immigrants, undocumented workers, people who don't complain to city agencies, don't call their councilman, don't make noise. The city didn't care about them. So the city didn't enforce the rules meant to protect them." Fire Commissioner Carlos Rivera was forced to resign 3 weeks after the fire. During a contentious press conference, a reporter asked why the club was allowed to reopen. Rivera, frustrated, angry, responded, quote, "We have 1,300 inspectors, covering 8 million people. We can't monitor every closed establishment. We don't have the resources, the manpower. We shut them down and assume they stay closed. What more do you want us to do?" Mayor David Dinkins, standing beside him, winced at the response. The answer, of course, was to do better, to follow up, to protect the most vulnerable. But that would require resources, political will, a recognition that immigrant communities deserved the same protection as wealthy neighborhoods. None of which existed in 1990. Lydia Feliciano's family, devastated by her death, spoke at a memorial service. Her mother, Rosa Feliciano, through tears, said, quote, "My daughter died because nobody cared, not the building owner, not the club operator, not the city inspectors. They saw Honduran immigrants, poor people, nobodies. So they didn't protect us. My daughter went to work to earn $5 an hour, and she burned to death because nobody cared. Her sister, Carmen Fernandez, was more direct. Quote, Julio Gonzalez murdered my sister, but he had help. The owner, the operator, the city, they all killed those people, just as surely as if they'd lit the match themselves. The trials began in 1991. Julio Gonzalez, charged with 87 counts of murder, 87 counts of attempted murder for the survivors, arson, assault. His defense, minimal. His lawyer argued he was too intoxicated to form intent. That he didn't mean to kill everyone, just to scare his girlfriend. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Eric Warner, played the confession video. Gonzalez, calm, rational, describing exactly what he did and why. Warner's closing argument, as reported by the New York Times, was devastating. Quote, The defendant wants you to believe he was too drunk to know what he was doing, but he was sober enough to buy gasoline, sober enough to carry it 3 blocks, sober enough to pour it precisely at the entrance where it would block the only exit, sober enough to light a match. That's not intoxication. That's premeditation. That's murder. The jury deliberated for 2 days. They returned with guilty verdicts on all counts. 87 counts of murder in the second degree. The judge, sentencing Gonzalez, was unsparing. Quote from the transcript. Mr. Gonzalez, you committed an act of pure evil. You deliberately trapped and killed 87 innocent people. Because your girlfriend ended a relationship, you are, without question, one of the most depraved criminals this court has ever seen. You will spend the rest of your natural life in prison, and even that is insufficient punishment for what you've done. The sentence, 25 years to life, on each murder count, to run consecutively. Gonzalez would need to serve, at minimum, 2,175 years before parole eligibility. He's currently incarcerated in New York State. He will die in prison. If you found this story compelling, consider subscribing to Built to Fail. We cover disasters where warnings were ignored, where institutional negligence led to preventable tragedies, where working people paid with their lives for others' mistakes. The building owner, J. Vice, charged with 87 counts of criminally negligent homicide. The prosecution argued he knew the building was unsafe, knew it was operating illegally, continued collecting rent anyway. His defense, that he was just a landlord, that he couldn't monitor every tenant, that the responsibility lay with the club operator. The trial, contentious, lasted 6 weeks. Survivors testified, families of victims testified, fire marshals testified about the violations Vice had been informed of. But the jury, unconvinced that Vice had criminal intent, acquitted him on all charges. He was, however, found liable in civil court. Multiple families sued. The settlements, totaling over $6 million, were distributed among victims' families. Vice, in a statement after the civil verdict, said, quote, I deeply regret the tragedy that occurred. I never intended for anyone to be harmed. I trusted that the club operator would comply with all safety requirements. Critics, including victim advocate groups, called the statement insulting. Of course he didn't intend for anyone to be harmed, but he profited from a building he knew was unsafe. Intent doesn't matter when 87 people are dead. Club operator Elias Colon pleaded guilty to 87 counts of criminally negligent homicide. He faced up to 25 years in prison. At sentencing, Colon apologized. Quote, "I am sorry, I never thought this would happen. I was trying to provide a place for my community, a place to gather, to celebrate. I made terrible mistakes, and people died. I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life." The judge, sentencing him to 15 years, said, quote, "Mr. Colon, your intentions may have been good, but your actions were criminally negligent. You operated an illegal establishment. You violated every safety code. You prioritized profit over people, and 87 individuals paid the ultimate price. You will serve your sentence, though no punishment can restore what was lost." Colon was released in 2003 after serving 12 years. He returned to Honduras, never speaking publicly about the fire again. The fire's aftermath led to changes. New York City, embarrassed by the catastrophic failure of enforcement, overhauled its inspection system. Social clubs, now subject to mandatory annual inspections, even unlicensed ones. The fire department, given authority to padlock buildings immediately if they found life safety violations. Building owners, now criminally liable if they knowingly rent to illegal establishments. The Happy Land Law, passed by the City Council, made it a felony to operate or own a building used as an illegal social club. But enforcement, still a problem. In 1995, just 5 years after Happy Land, a fire at the Bronx social club killed one person. Investigators found it had no fire exits, no sprinklers, no certificate of occupancy. Sound familiar? In 2007, a fire at a Bronx nightclub killed 11 people. No sprinklers, inadequate exits, operating without proper licenses. The cycle continued. Because immigrant communities, still marginalized, still underserved, still operating in spaces that wealthy neighborhoods would never tolerate. Still dying in fires that should never happen. Dr. Glenn Corbett, fire science professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, studies the Happy Land fire. Quote from his analysis. Happy Land represents a perfect example of systemic failure. Every protective measure failed. The building code, ignored. The fire marshal's shutdown order, ignored. The follow-up enforcement, non-existent. And the community, afraid to complain, afraid to demand better. Because they're immigrants. Because they're marginalized. Because society has told them they don't matter. He paused in the interview, then continued. 87 people didn't die because of Julio Gonzalez. They died because we built a system that values some lives over others. That protects wealthy neighborhoods but ignores poor ones. That enforces rules in Manhattan but not the Bronx. Gonzalez lit the match. But society built the fire trap. Is he right? Was Happy Land just one man's crime? Or was it something larger? A reflection of how we treat immigrants, how we enforce safety codes based on zip codes, how we decide whose lives matter. Those are uncomfortable questions. But 87 bodies, laid out on Southern Boulevard, demand we ask them. Among the survivors, the psychological toll was enormous. Armando Ruiz, who survived in the bathroom with 4 others, developed severe PTSD, quote from a later interview. I can't go into crowded spaces, clubs, bars, even restaurants. I feel trapped. I hear the screams. I smell the smoke. 20 years later and it's like I'm still in that bathroom, listening to people die, knowing I couldn't help them. Ruben Valladares, the bouncer who ran through flames. suffered third-degree burns on 40% of his body. Multiple surgeries, months in the hospital, permanent scarring. He testified at all the trials, describing what he saw, what Gonzalez said, the moment the fire started. He told one reporter, quote, "People ask if I'm a hero. For getting out. For surviving. I'm not. A hero would have saved people. I saved myself. I live with that. With knowing I survived and 87 others didn't. That's not heroism. That's survivor's guilt. And it never goes away." The families of the victims, many Honduran, struggled to get their loved ones' bodies returned home. The cost of transportation, prohibitive for working families. The Honduran government eventually stepped in, arranged for chartered flights. In Tegucigalpa, a mass funeral was held, 47 caskets, draped in Honduran flags. Thousands attended. President Rafael Leonardo Callejas, addressing the mourners, said, quote, "These were our children, our brothers and sisters. They went to America seeking a better life. They found only death, in a place that should have been safe, that should have been protected. We mourn them, and we demand answers." But what answers could satisfy? The building was unsafe. Everyone knew it. The city failed to enforce its own orders. Everyone knew that too. A man, rejected and angry, killed 87 people in revenge. What answer, what explanation, could possibly make that acceptable? In the Bronx, at 1767 Southern Boulevard, the building still stands. It's vacant now, boarded up, covered in graffiti. A memorial plaque, installed by the Honduran consulate, lists the names of the 87 victims. Neighbors sometimes leave flowers. Candles, on the anniversary, March 25. The building, scheduled for demolition multiple times, still stands. A monument to institutional failure, to lives undervalued, to warnings ignored. Jose Antonio Gonzalez's brother, Fernando, visits the memorial sometimes. His brother, aged 23, died in the fire. Quote from an interview. "Jose was a good person, worked hard, sent money to our mother every month. He went to Happy Land that night to relax, to dance, to forget about his troubles. Instead, he died, trapped, unable to escape, because the owner wanted profit, because the operator ignored the law, because the city didn't care. My brother's death, it wasn't an accident. It was murder, not just by Gonzalez, by everyone who let that club operate." He's right. Julio Gonzalez, guilty, absolutely, he lit the match. But Jay Weiss, who collected rent on a building he knew was unsafe. Elias Colon, who packed people into a fire trap for $5 a head. The fire marshal who shut it down but never followed up. The city officials who knew illegal clubs were operating but didn't enforce the law. Are they not guilty too? Different degrees, perhaps. But guilty nonetheless. Fire safety expert John Nicholson, who analyzed the Happy Land fire for the National Fire Protection Association, wrote, quote, "From a technical standpoint, Happy Land should never have happened. Every fire safety principle we teach, every regulation we've written, every lesson learned from previous tragedies, all of it was ignored. The building had a single exit. That alone should have prevented its use as an assembly space. Add no sprinklers, no fire alarm, no emergency lighting. It's not a nightclub. It's a crematorium waiting for a spark." He continued. What makes Happy Land particularly tragic is that we knew better. By 1990, we had a century of fire safety knowledge. The Triangle Shirtwaist Fire was 1911, 79 years earlier. Same lesson, locked exits, inadequate egress, workers trapped, 146 dead. We learned nothing, or we learned it, and then forgot, or decided it didn't apply to immigrants in the Bronx. The Triangle Fire reference, apt. Triangle Shirtwaist, 146 workers, mostly immigrant women, died because the exits were locked. The owners, charged with manslaughter, acquitted. Sound familiar? Different century, same pattern. Working immigrants, undervalued lives, inadequate enforcement, owners who prioritize profit, acquittals or minimal punishment. How many times do we have to learn this lesson? How many people have to die before we decide that all lives, regardless of immigration status, regardless of income, regardless of neighborhood, have equal value? Have equal right to protection? Those questions remain unanswered. Because 25 years after Happy Land, illegal social clubs still operate. Still pack people into unsafe buildings. Still collect money without permits, without inspections, without basic fire safety. And when inspectors do show up, the clubs close for a day, change their name, reopen. The cycle continues. One final story. Before we end. Marie Colon, no relation to Elias, was a nurse in the Bronx. She treated some of the burn victims, including Ruben Valladares. Years later, she spoke at a fire safety conference. Quote from her speech. I've seen burn victims before, but Happy Land was different. These weren't people injured in accidents. These were people murdered by negligence. Their injuries, preventable. Their deaths, preventable. Everything about that night, preventable. I looked at those burns, those victims, and I thought, this is what happens when society decides some people don't matter. When we build systems that protect some neighborhoods but not others. When we let landlords profit from fire traps. When we allow operators to pack people into death traps. This is the result. 87 bodies. Burned beyond recognition. Because we decided they weren't worth protecting. She paused, looked at the audience. You know what the worst part is? It's going to happen again. Because we haven't learned. We haven't changed. Not really. We passed some laws. We increased some penalties. But the fundamental problem remains. We still treat immigrant communities as expendable. We still under-enforce in poor neighborhoods. We still let building owners profit from unsafe properties. So yes, it will happen again. Maybe not 87 dead. Maybe fewer. But people will die. In fires that shouldn't happen. In buildings that shouldn't be occupied. Because we refuse to learn. Was she right? The Bronx Social Club fire in 1995. 1 dead. The Bronx Nightclub fire in 2007. 11 dead. She was right. We didn't learn. The metal gate was padlocked from the outside. 1 entrance, 1 exit. 87 people trapped. Every fire safety system that should have protected them, absent. Every regulation that should have prevented this, ignored. Every inspection that should have shut this down, incomplete or forgotten. And 1 man, armed with $1 of gasoline, killed them all. But Julio Gonzalez didn't act alone. He had accomplices. A building owner who profited from a fire trap. A club operator who packed people in for $5 each. A city that enforced fire codes in some neighborhoods but not others. A society that treated immigrant lives as less valuable than others. All of them, in their way, lit that match. Gonzalez, convicted, imprisoned for life. Vice, acquitted criminally, paid civil damages, walked free. 15 years, released after 12, returned to Honduras. The city officials, some resigned, most kept their jobs. No one else went to prison. No one else was held accountable. 87 people dead. One man in prison. That's not justice. That's insulting. The survivors, still haunted. The families, still grieving. The memorial, still standing. And the lessons, still unlearned. How many warnings do we need? How many violations? How many shutdown orders ignored? How many illegal clubs operating in plain sight? Before we decide that enforcement matters, that immigrant lives matter, that fire safety isn't optional. 515 violations at Upper Big Branch, 29 dead. 87 violations at Bronx Tropicana, club reopens anyway, 87 dead. The pattern, clear. Warnings ignored, workers die. That's the story of Happy Land. That's the story of every preventable disaster in this series. Experts warn, management ignores, workers die. Gonzalez lit the match, but society built the tinderbox. And until we address that, until we decide that all lives have equal value, that all neighborhoods deserve equal protection, that landlords who profit from fire traps deserve prison, not just fines. Until then, the next Happy Land is just waiting for its match. The metal gate was padlocked from the outside. 87 people trapped behind it. Dead in 3 minutes. Because $1 of gasoline, plus decades of neglect, equals the deadliest fire in New York City's modern history. We remember them. Jose Antonio Gonzalez, Maria del Carmen Sanchez, Pedro Miguel Morales. 84 others. All gone. All preventable. All ignored until it was too late. That's the final lesson of Happy Land. When we fail to protect the most vulnerable, when we underenforce in poor neighborhoods, when we treat immigrant lives as expendable, people die. Not in accidents, but in murders by negligence. And the blood is on all our hands.